about the prospect of digital ID cards, thrown out, just literally thrown on the table randomly by Keir Starmer at the beginning of his Labour Party conference a week or two ago. And already, well, I think within a few days, we had 2.5 million people sign a petition against digital ID cards. And we saw actually in the polls people's support for digital ID cards, which is usually predicated on well, it'll be such an easy one-stop shop and it's for our safety, dealing with illegal migration or whatever the latest claim is. You'd think people would be supporting it. But no, people have wisened up. Well, one of the reasons they've wisened up is people like Silkie Carlo, who's my next guest. She's director of Big Brother Watch and who've been talking about this issue for a very long time. Good afternoon to you, Silkie.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, there are so many arguments against ID cards and so few good arguments for them. It is amazing to me that government after government come up with this. We know Tony Blair is obsessed with ID cards, tried to bring them in way back when. Now, that was at a time when it was kind of like, just had an ID card, then it's some sort of digital aspect. Now that we've all got these mobile phones in our pockets, not all of us, but most of us, smartphones, they're talking about, it's not a card, is it? It is literally something that an app on your phone that will not just be a record of, your name, your address, I don't know, your right to work in this country as it's being played about illegal migrants being stopped. But it's going to have real-time information about you, updated all the time. And that's where the really, really sinister aspects come in, doesn't it?
Well, the pretext that this has been sold on is a lie. It's been sold as this is something that will be mandatory for the right to work because that will curb illegal immigration. Everyone who's looked at this has said this will do absolutely nothing to curb illegal working. By people who've come into the country and undocumented.
Who already have to have checks. I mean, an employer who doesn't bother asking for their passport or visa or their national insurance number is not going to be going, oh, but I do need to see your digital ID.
Exactly. So the pretext that this mandatory digital ID has been sold to the public on is a lie. And so people rightly are distrustful and asking, what will it really be used for? At the moment, what we know is that it will have basic information and your biometric information. So that's information as sensitive as what's on your passport, your facial biometric. This is happening, by the way, at the same time that this government is having a big push on live facial recognition cameras all over our high streets. And so I think it's right that people then consider the ways in which this will become a sprawling surveillance system. Because at the same time as Starmer has said, this is only for the right to work, which is illogical, doesn't make any sense, and clearly isn't anything to do with illegal working. Multiple ministers have come out and said, actually, it would be really good for pensions, it'd be really good for benefits, it'd be really good for tax collection, and a number of other things. They're even talking about looking at whether to roll this out to 13-year-olds.
Wow.
And in the government's own documentation, quite aside from the press release, I've got the government's explainer sheets, I've got the letter they sent around to parliamentarians. They're talking about private sector uses, about using digital ID to open private banks, about using it to prove your age in different scenarios, about the right to rent, basically your right to live.
To take part at all in society. But they said, no, it's just about our safety. I mean, we've heard that before, haven't we, during COVID? But that's interesting, as the Prime Minister on this trip to India, after announcing these plans late last month, and saying, no, it's just about immigration. And he's now talking about how it can be used for tax collection, claiming benefits, booking childcare, even applying for your child's school. And there will be people, even people who've been I like to think far too sensible to believe this would be a good idea, who are listening to this right now going, oh, it would be useful, wouldn't it, not to have to provide lots of different bits of ID, and I could just provide this one thing and it's on my phone and I've got it with me all the time. Well, I mean, I've got a passport, I've got a driving licence, I've got credit cards, I've got I hand over all my information to X and to Facebook and TikTok every day anyway. What difference does this make? Why are you making such a big deal out of it, Silkie?
Well, if it's useful and people want it, there's no need to make it mandatory, is there? And so this could be something that the government offers to people that you can volunteer into. But the risk is that it's mandatory. You have no choice. And already this is a system that is being paired with incredibly significant punishments. If you don't have Starmer's digital ID card, even though you've got a British passport, you were born here, a birth certificate and everything else, you won't be able to work. the next thing will be, by their own indications, what they're talking about in the small print, is the right to rent. So you basically won't be able to live in your own country unless you have a digital ID. So I think it's important. And actually, the word that Starmer has used on this India trip is calling it a passport, as in a passport in everyday life. So what I would say to people is, this isn't just about identifying yourself. I get that it's useful for us all to have something easy to identify yourself when you really need to. It's about creating a kind of permission-based society where we live on license to the state, and we have to comply with probably growing and sprawling rules, enabled to do ordinary things that we need to do to live our lives. That is a completely different society to the one in which we live, and it's not a very free one.
Indeed, and we were talking with Baroness Claire Fox about this, and she's been a big sort of freedom campaigner over the years, as indeed were you know, lockdown as well, is that it does turn on its head our relationship with the state, doesn't it, in terms of who, you know, we are individuals, we're born free, we are free unless there is a law made by our democratically elected parliament that limits that particular freedom because of an impact on other people. You know, you can't steal, you can't kill. You can do anything in this country that there isn't an explicit law against. That is the theory. And it turns it on its head. Like, basically it means you can only do things that the government allows you to do.
Yes, exactly. You can only do things that the government allows you to do, proven by this digital permit connected to your facial biometrics. You know, basically your face becomes a barcode, and then permissions are issued on this digital identifier. The other thing that's quite chilling is that Starmer has looked at India's sprawling digital ID system and said it's a massive success. He's clearly ill-informed about this. There are people in India who have actually died from starvation as a result of the Aadhaar digital ID scheme over there. There are reams of evidence and documentation about this by academics. I mean, it's just so ill-informed. And I think, you know, this is something that often comes with human rights abuses and risks.
But again, you got people say nothing to hide, nothing to fear. But my God, we've seen, you know, even if you're a law-abiding citizen, you know, when we saw what happened in lockdown, we saw with COVID, the extraordinary overreach by government, supposedly for our safety. My worry is how many people would go, yeah, anything for safety. But of course, this all assumes they can do this. Governments of every hue, their record on major IT projects, not just the huge cost. I mean, they're saying a few billion. We are talking about absurd amounts of money for this. Their record on getting these things actually working, keeping them working, their record on hacking. I mean, none of this suggests this is actually going to happen in the next few years.
Yeah, well, Blair's ID scheme, you know, £5 billion of public money was wasted on that, and it never got off the ground. Well, I, like you, I'm incredibly emboldened by the spirit of British people who've looked at this and said, we don't buy the lie, we don't trust the government. We saw what happened with COVID IDs. You know, how quickly will this become something where, oh, you could go to school, but now because you haven't had the third jab, you can't. You know, like we're well aware of the risks, and I think likewise, this will never get off the ground. A huge portion of the public will never do this. Even Boris Johnson has said.
Boris Johnson. I certainly won't carry one. I always said I'll carry a passport. I'll get a vaccine if it's required by another country, because that's my choice. I will not prove anything to anybody in this country, because this is my country. The thing is, we can think it's unlikely it'll ever happen, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't stop being vigilant and preventing it from happening. That's the key.
We mustn't be complacent. No to number 2, digitalid.co.uk is where our campaign is. We have to fight this tooth and nail, because if it does get off the ground, this is the problem. If it does get off the ground, this is the kind of thing that's irreversible, and it will change the foundation of our society forever. So now is the time to put up the fight.
100%. Silkie Carlo, Director of Big Brother Watch, thank you so much, and thank you for keeping that fight going behind the scenes before this exploded in our faces again. Benedict Spence, brief word?
It's a literal return to serfdom, where you need to seek the permission of effectively a lord. At least in the medieval period, you could meet your lord. Now it's simply an interface, which you might not even have access to. What's very egregious is the fact that the changing demographics and the changing nature of how people interact in this country, facilitated by governments, which has destroyed the trust and led to a massive insweep of illegal migration, is being used as justification to do this to us. Having trashed everything themselves,
they create the problem.
We're going to do this to you, and you're going to love it.
And it's a no from me. 12:49 is the time. Take a quick break. Up